just going back to pre-1979. So Iran was an incredible country in many ways. Things were very positive back then. You could be critical of the way it was ruled, how strict the intelligence or the SAVAK, I think it was called, was at the time. But from an economical and social perspective, completely different. So give us an idea of how it was. You got, women's rights were very different. The economy was doing really well. I've got some numbers here. You had national income was growing, grew 423 times. The military was the fifth strongest military at the time. Women had a lot more rights than they do today. The literacy was also improving. So can you give us a better overview of people in the US to kind of imagine Iran back then?
Well, I think in general terms, as you just said, socially speaking, Iran was really a country that was beginning to benefit from the kind of modernization process that started at the time of my grandfather, but was further carried out at the time of my father in terms of prosperity and people's livelihood becoming better. It was not just about women; it was key, of course, but it was about the fact that we never had to face the kind of discrimination that this regime has created against different ethnicities or religious communities. Iran was a country where people of different faiths were living together in peace and in harmony. We didn't have issues between Muslims, whether they were Sunnis or Shiites or Christians or Baha'is or Zoroastrians or Jews or what have you. This was as a result of this regime that all of a sudden came in, imposed a singular religious ideology to the detriment of everyone else, and that started the whole process of discrimination and inequality as a result. In terms of political liberties, yes, it was not ideal. And again, I would like to stress the fact that during the Cold War, part of the problems we had was certain groups that were leftist or Marxist groups were pretty much carrying out Moscow's bid. They were not out there to exercise the liberty of expression. They were actually carrying out a certain agenda dictated by Moscow. And when you talk about Iran's sovereignty and integrity, we had to be able to navigate between how far is it that you allow participation, but to what extent are you actually allowing elements that are not doing it as a result of our national interests, but are doing somebody else's bidding, getting involved. And, Iran was not the only country facing that. Look, half of Europe during the Cold War, all the countries behind the Iron Curtain. If you ask them today, what role did Russia or the Soviet Union had in controlling every aspect of their lives when they were behind that curtain? They will understand the phenomenon then of some leftist groups who were actually not there to, let's say, advocate socialism, but was really a totally different idea of international communism and what have you. So as a result, there might be criticism against some aspects of the Iranian intelligence service and how it dealt with the problem. But I think retrospectively, even if you ask people who at the time were opposed to the regime and had to face that, what has been said about that entity has been grossly exaggerated in terms of the true narrative. And it's only retrospectively in analysis that people see a balance between how far was that criticism legitimate and how far was it exaggerated. Having said that, the vision that we have for Iran's future takes into account all the experience that we have had, good and bad, so that we avoid replicating the same mistakes in the future. But most importantly, I think the biggest guarantee for people in terms of secular democracy and all of their freedoms and their rights in the context of what they ought to have in the future, in contrast to what they have today, is ultimately the rule of law. And if we are able to establish that under a democratic system, that's where citizens of Iran, irrespective of their sexual orientation or political ideology or whatever ethnicity or religious belief that they belong to, will be guaranteed equal treatment under the law. I think that's the element that is fundamentally important and a prerequisite to a positive future. You cannot have a stable governance without a free economy, and you cannot have a free economy without a stable governance. The two goes hand in glove. And I think when you look at the problems that you have in Iran today, including the economic problem, it's because a lot of it ties to the nature of the regime itself. And it has nothing to do with the Iranian people, their aspirations, or for that matter, our natural resources, because Iran is a country that today should have been, if not the Japan of the Middle East, at least the next South Korea of the Middle East. Instead, we have become the North Korea of the Middle East. Speaking of Korea, Iran's GDP was twice that of South Korea in 1978. Today, Korea's GDP is 7 times that of Iran, a country that has oil resources, natural gas resources, a country that its government cannot even provide people the most basic needs in terms of energy, in terms of electricity, in terms of water. This is what's in contrast. So when you look at the future and what a different Iran could be, it all ties back to the nature of the regime in place and the fact that Iran, free of this regime, will regain not only all the potential that it did realize before the revolution, but hundreds of times even stronger, I think, in the future.